So let's say I want to do some software. While I'm developing this product and while I'm going through the steps of actually making a service or product that I want to sell, should I be considering any of these steps beforehand, or should I just focus on the development of the product?
Great question. Yes, you should absolutely be thinking about these three variables as you're developing the product, as you're thinking about starting the business, and before you even get to the product. Because remember what I said was one of the number one reasons that startups fail. A couple of days ago, when I first started talking about capitalists for capitalism and the importance of purpose, I said there are three key P's to building a successful business and really being successful in life, in my opinion. The first is having a clear purpose. And that's what we worked on in the first workshop. You really thinking about your personal purpose, how that can be translated into a business. And we started to think about the people that you want to work with in order to live out your purpose. And yesterday, we had a great conversation, me and Bill, about how to build your network, how to develop relationships. And so find the people that you want to work with, that frankly, you just want to spend your life with and do great things with, because you need those people in order to lead a successful life and to build strong businesses. And today, we're going to cover the third P, really, the concept of profit. This is where you take your purpose and the people that you're working with and really think about how to build a successful business. And I'm going to be focused in particular on entrepreneurship, because I'll just say this. Entrepreneurs are the heroes of society. They're the ones who see problems that others can't solve and are dedicated to finding a way to overcome those problems, to create new value in the world, to take humanity to unparalleled heights. It is incredibly challenging. It is incredibly lonely and incredibly rewarding at the same time. But admittedly, it's not for everyone. How many people here want to be an entrepreneur? Have the idea of being one? I love that. I want to encourage everyone to consider it. But I also don't want you to think that my recommendation is for everyone to be an entrepreneur at the same time, because it is so challenging. You might have heard the statistic before that 4 out of 5 new businesses fail in the first 5 years. It's absolutely true. The number is probably higher, especially when you're talking about startups that are trying to succeed in bigger ways, to be growth startups. And that's because when you're creating something new, you have so many risks to what you're doing. There are so many reasons that startups fail. Some of the most common ones include time. It takes a lot of time to build a successful business. Bill Gates has a fantastic line that most people overestimate what they can accomplish in 1 year and underestimate what they can accomplish in 10. The thing is, though, if you're starting a business, you need to have those 10 years to get the results that you want. That means you need to be ready to persevere through everything yourself for 10 years. You need to keep other people on board with what you're doing for 10 years. You need the cash to pay for everything, including your meals and housing during that time, in order to build the business up. It's a lot to get enough time to build the successful business that you want. A second big reason startups fail is just timing. You might have the best idea in the world for a product that everyone is absolutely going to love. But if you develop it too early, people aren't going to buy it because they don't know what it is, or maybe the market isn't ready to meet the demand for it yet. You need to make sure that what you're creating is something that people are willing to pay for right now or in the near future, to give yourself that runway, to get that time in order to build the business. Or from the other side with timing, you might be a little too late. If you come up with a great idea that someone else is working on 6, 12 months ahead of you, and they get the first mover advantage, they may crowd out the market and so prevent you from bringing your idea to life. Moving quickly is critical to building a successful startup. The third big reason startups fail is just an issue of cash. And by that I mean cash flow in particular. It's not enough to have something that people are willing to pay for. You need to get them to pay for it, or you need to get investors or a bank to give you a loan or some way to get capital in order to pay for everything from web domains to flights to conferences to the inventory you need for your product or whatever it is. You need to make sure that you've got access to cash in order to build a strong business. But after that, one of the biggest reasons startups fail is founder dynamics. If you're going to start a business, you need to be really committed to it. And when you bring other founders into your business to help it grow, you need to make sure that they're the kind of people who are all in it with you and that you're able to work with effectively and balance out your weaknesses and that you can balance out theirs in order to have a strong, thriving team. Looking over hundreds of startups over the last year and a half with Liberty Ventures and talking with our advisors and investors who have looked at tens of thousands of startups, this is actually the one thing that they emphasize the most to me and that I've seen as challenges, because a startup is not about the product. A startup is not about the market, although those are important. I've said this before and I'll emphasize again. A startup, like any other business, is a group of people working together to serve other people. And if you have the wrong team or the wrong dynamics on the team, if fights break out, if different visions are in conflict with each other, and you're not meshing together, then you're not able to work on the strategy or develop the best products and services to bring to market and build your business. So you have to pay attention to the founding team. But the last big reason that a lot of startups fail is that the founders are obsessed with their product, their idea. That's what drives a lot of people into entrepreneurship. You have this amazing idea, this restaurant that really should exist with a concept that no one else has done that you're in love with. Or you've got this new technology that you think is more innovative than anything else that ought to be adopted by everyone in the world. But if you're obsessed with that product, with your own idea, rather than the problem that product is supposed to solve for people, the value it's supposed to create for them, then your company is likely not going to succeed, because other people aren't going to be in love with your idea. They're not going to be in love with your product. They're in love with solving their own problems. And only to the extent that your product, your business solves their problems are they going to care about it. There are a lot of people who thought the 8-track was a whole lot better than the cassette player. This might be a bad example. Does anyone know what an 8-track is in this room? Yeah, everyone in the back does. No student does. Okay, this was a very poor technology in the 80s for how to listen to music, long before iPhones and CDs and anything else. And it actually was a better technology, but it wasn't widely adopted because it didn't solve problems for people. There were other things they were looking for. Now, the way I'm going to approach this session is actually to give you a lot of examples of startups that we've been looking at Liberty Ventures and the ways that they're set up, and for you to understand the mindset of investors in particular to looking at startups, to think about which ones are going to be most successful, which ones to support, and what help to give them. But to caveat this, before I get into this material on here and then show you our diligence memos and things like that, I want to provide an important caveat. Not all startups are the same, especially when it comes to an investor's perspective. There really are two types of startups: lifestyle and growth startups. A lifestyle startup is something that an entrepreneur creates because you just want to see this company exist. It's not a company that you think is going to become worth $1 billion. It's not something that's even going to be worth maybe $100 million. It's something that's going to make money for you. Maybe it'll do a few $1 million in revenue a year. It's going to let you live the kind of life that you want, travel the way that you want, maybe buy some nice things. Maybe not, actually. Maybe it's just letting you work in the industry that you love because you want to run a restaurant and you're going to be able to survive on that. But it's not the kind of business that other people can give you money to help really scale up and so get returns from themselves. If that's the kind of business you want to start and run, that's great. That's an amazing kind of company. That's the majority of businesses in America, the majority of small businesses. But if you want to build a company that does reach, say, 100 million, $1 billion in revenue, that you're going to need to take outside capital in to help scale because you don't have enough of it yourself, that you're going to need to recruit incredibly large teams to in order to deliver the products and services that you want, you're talking about a growth company. And you're talking about fundamentally different dynamics and responsibilities where you're not really your own boss. In a lifestyle business, you get to do whatever you want. You are the ultimate person accountable, and if things go wrong in the business, you're the one who pays the price. In a growth business, you have so many more people who are depending upon you. Think about all of the employees that you're talking about hiring, all of the customers who come to depend on your product and service for what they do, all of the investors that you bring on, and they're going to hold you accountable in a way that won't happen with a lifestyle business. This is especially not for everyone. It is scary. It has a lot of responsibility. It has a lot of risks. But again, it can have tremendous rewards because those are the businesses that start to change societies and the world. These are the kinds of businesses that venture capital investors in particular are looking for. And these are the kinds of businesses that we at Liberty Ventures are looking for in particular. Because if we're going to be making investments, even small investments of say $25,000 or $50,000 into an early stage startup idea, where you have a business that's maybe just an idea on the back of a napkin, no revenue yet, or maybe you've been working with a founding team on this for a little while, but you still haven't developed a product, or maybe you don't really have anyone buying yet. We'll invest in those companies, but we need to expect incredibly outsized returns, say 100x returns on a $50,000 investment, because more than likely, your business isn't going to succeed. The power law in venture capital is a 90-10 rule, or really a 95-5 rule. 90% of the investments that venture capitalists make, they expect to not return anything. So think about that. Say we have a $10 million venture capital fund. The expectation is that $9 million of those dollars invested out of that fund will just be lost. It might be spread out across 18 different investments. All that money's gone. Say only 2 out of 20 investments, $1 million worth, actually delivers a return. You not only need that money to bring in those $9 million that have been lost, you need that $1 million to turn into even more than that, to deliver returns to investors, to justify those investors giving money to the venture capital fund instead of putting it in the stock market or instead of giving it to a different fund. That's where you start to realize that if you're, for outside investors, especially venture capitalists, you're looking for 50 or 100x returns on any individual investment. That is a very high bar to set and very tough to meet. But that's the game in venture capital, and it is possible. We see, so many of the companies that started out with venture capital investments that have ballooned into incredible businesses. Facebook is probably the best well known for this, where Peter Thiel, the successful venture capitalist in Silicon Valley, made a $500,000 investment in them back in 2005 or 2006 that has turned into tens of billions of dollars for him as Facebook grew. But that was incredibly risky. He's lost a lot of his investments as well. But there's a certain process that investors go through in order to decide which companies they're going to back, which startups have the greatest likelihood of success. And to be perfectly honest, it's not rocket science. It's not an algorithm. I'll say that from the outset too. It's not the case that I can tell you immediately if your business idea or if you're going to be successful at entrepreneurship. There are so many factors to consider. And so much of this actually comes from investors just getting experience, looking at a lot of examples and being able to get a feel for which companies are going to succeed and which aren't. But there is a certain formula to it. And I'll share with you now how we approach this formula at Liberty Ventures and actually give you an example of it. So the way that we diligence investment opportunities, startups, is by going through a series of interviews and deep dives into what they're doing, having conversations with advisors, ultimately with the goal of putting together a diligence memo. And by diligence, I mean vetting the company, evaluating its likelihood to grow and succeed and be able to deliver a return. So if we invest money in a company, can we expect to actually get a return from this? Do we think it's going to succeed? And at the end of the day, there are three variables that matter the most, not just for Liberty Ventures, but across the board in venture capital. Number one, the founding team. This matters more than anything else, and every investor will say this. Because if you've got the right people leading the company, who are not only analytically intelligent, yeah, we want to invest in smart people, but who also have emotional intelligence, your ability to connect with other individuals, to persuade people to believe in your vision, to want to join your team, to make sacrifices for the company, is critical to building it up. Because if someone is really smart, but incredibly socially awkward or mean or just turns people away, they're likely not going to be able to build out the right teams going forward. But we also are looking for people who are humble, people who are willing to learn, who aren't coming in thinking they've got everything figured out already, because there's only one thing that I know about any business plan that I look at from a startup founder. It's wrong. Whatever plan you write down when you're coming up with your business is going to be wrong. The key question then is, are you smart enough to realize that it's wrong and to be able to quickly identify why it's wrong once you get more data to figure it out, and then pivot the company based on that data, figuring out the solutions and figuring out what comes next? Are you capable of learning? Are you capable of taking feedback from others to make the business better? There's a lot more we'll go into in a moment, but the founding team really is the first thing that every investor looks at with startups. Second thing, as I said, the second thing then is the market opportunity. How big is the market that you're going at? How much is it worth? How many millions, billions, or trillions of dollars is this that you're then going to try and build a business to capture? Because that represents how big your company might be able to grow. And this is what really starts to set growth companies apart from lifestyle companies. Take the example of starting a restaurant in your hometown. Maybe you want to start an Italian or a Thai restaurant or something else. If you're in a town of 50,000 people and you're just starting an Italian restaurant, how big can that restaurant actually get? How much money could it actually feasibly bring in every year? That's not going to be nearly as much as if you start a software as a service company that anyone in the world is able to access and be able to pay for on a regular basis, and say is in financial technology that people are willing to pay a lot of money for because it's moving money around. That is a much bigger market that is going to make investors much more interested in the company idea. Now, again, that's not to say that you can't find investors for a local restaurant or opening a hotel or some other business. You will find people who are interested in that. But for venture capital in particular, and for bigger checks, you want to have a bigger market that you're thinking about, which also indicates how big your vision is for where you want to take the company. And then the third variable that we look at is the product or service. That is the last thing that we actually look at. Now, your idea is probably what motivates you, what gets you excited and why you want to be an entrepreneur. But that's the last thing that investors are looking at. Because if it's not fitting the right market, if it doesn't have the right founding team, the idea isn't going to go anywhere. And your idea is going to change as you build the company up. Now, those are the three broad areas: the founding team, i.e. people, the market, and the unique product or service. Now, as we go through and look at companies and consider which ones to invest in, we start with an overview where we put together the descriptions of each of those areas, and we make the case for why to invest, but we also make the steelman case against investing as well. We're looking for reasons to not invest in companies because we know most of them are going to fail, and you need to be ready for that. But as we dig into each of these variables, when we're thinking about the founding team, we really want to look at some of those things that I mentioned before. We're looking at their humility and their ability to learn. We're looking at their intelligence and their experience in the industry to give us a sense as to whether you really know what you're talking about to succeed here. But there's another variable that also especially matters, I've kind of talked about before, but I'm going to emphasize now: grit. Entrepreneurship is a marathon, not a sprint. And it's one that's going to throw all kinds of obstacles and challenges at you to prevent you from succeeding. Most of the time, those founders who succeed aren't necessarily the smartest ones. They're not the ones with the greatest idea or even the first movers. They're the ones who are willing to stick through it no matter what. And so one of the things that we look for is experience of the founders in showing their ability to persevere. Have they come through hard times before? Have you participated in difficult sports or difficult competitions and pushed through? What challenges have you already overcome to prepare you for the challenges ahead in entrepreneurship? This is an incredibly qualitative variable, but an important one. And that's one of the reasons why I was saying before, I'm not going to be able to tell you from the outset if you're going to succeed as an entrepreneur. And there's no algorithm for this, because so much of early stage investing is that gut feeling. Do I believe in you as someone who's going to be able to figure this out and going to be able to persevere through the hard times? And so when you're talking with investors, when you're talking with potential team members, when you're talking even with vendors or customers that are going to come to rely on you, you need to be able to persuade them that you're going to be there for them. You're going to figure this out. Steve Jobs was well known for creating what a lot of people called a reality distortion field around him, where he would have crazy, impossible ideas for what the world could look like. And whenever he was talking with people, somehow they came to believe that these impossibilities were possible with him. He distorted reality. That, from the outside, is something a lot of critics pointed to as a reason he was a bad leader and why people shouldn't have trusted him. But actually, in the world of entrepreneurship and investing, that's the reason to believe in him. This is something that investors look for all the time, a certain charisma factor to founders, to the ability to create that reality distortion field. Because that signals an ability to persuade people and to persevere through things and to bring people in, that commitment to that vision. So if you're starting a company, believe in it, believe in yourself, and be able to convey your belief in that in order to get them on board with you. But the last thing, and then for every investor, they're going to be looking for a certain alignment with their interests. For Liberty Ventures, we invest in values-aligned founders. We want to find founders who are capitalists for capitalism. That's our filter. Other investors have other filters. One of our advisors runs a fund called 1517. This was started by the original founders of the Teal 20 Under 20 Fellowship, which gives $100,000 grants to anyone who's under 20 to drop out of college and go build a business instead. And they realized after running that nonprofit program for a while, they were missing out on investment opportunities, and there were more incredible young people out there to invest in. So they literally just filter out opportunities by saying they only invest in founders who have not graduated from college. Pretty radical, but it works for them. They've done incredibly well. Other investors just look at certain industries. They only want to invest in software as a service, or they only want to invest in real estate, or they only want to invest in artificial intelligence now. If you're looking for investors, you want to find those who are aligned with you in some way and convey that alignment to them. And that's part of our diligence process. But then also, you don't just want to think about your founding team. You want to think about who your advisors and supporters are, because this is a signal to investors of how legitimate that you are. And I'll take this to an extreme example as to how some investors actually put too much weight on advisors, and this can be really dangerous. How many people know the name Elizabeth Holmes? A few. Okay. For those who don't know her, Elizabeth Holmes was a Stanford dropout who had this crazy amazing idea of being able to run something like a dozen or 100 different tests on a single drop of blood, so that we didn't have to take vials of blood out of people every time we wanted to run medical tests on them. And in building her business, Theranos, which came to be one of the darlings of Silicon Valley maybe 15 years ago, she recruited a lot of heavyweight advisors and board members. She recruited generals from the military, saying that this could help speed up medical testing in battlefields. She recruited former secretaries of state, saying that this would be helpful for national health. She got all of these big names on there and on her board or serving as advisors. And what that did is it conveyed authority and legitimacy that got investors and got early customers like, I think, CVS or one of those chains to buy into this. Except the problem was, all she had were those advisors. All she had was a great story and her reality distortion field. And there was nothing else behind it. So she actually the company went bankrupt when it was revealed they didn't have this technology. They were lying to investors and customers, and she either has been sentenced to jail or is in jail right now for committing fraud. So that is to give an illustration that advisors can go a really powerful way for you. They can be an incredible signal that you're doing something important when your name isn't known. But you've got to be able to back it up with substance behind your business so that you don't wind up like Elizabeth Holmes in jail for basically lying about what you're doing. All right, so that's the first variable, the people behind the company. The second variable to really think about is the market that you're going after. And this starts with something called TAM, SAM, SOM. Does anyone know what these terms mean? TAM is the total addressable market, the overall size of the market in terms of money that you could possibly fit your business into. So, for example, the TAM of the artificial intelligence industry is in the trillions of dollars that I can't even come up with right now. That's the total market potentially that if you're starting an artificial intelligence company, you could be going after. But realistically, you're not going to capture every dollar spent on artificial intelligence. We need to shrink that a little bit to the serviceable, addressable market. So that means what part of that overall, say, $10 trillion market is your company going to be able to actually service? Maybe you're developing chips for artificial intelligence, or maybe you're developing the next ChatGPT that's going to just be a fun tool for people to play around with. That might be, say, half the size of that total addressable market. So we've gone from 10 trillion down to 5 trillion. But even what's addressable is not what you're going to actually get to as a business. We're going to shrink that down even more to what's called the serviceable, obtainable market. How much of that 5 trillion as an AI company you're likely to actually be able to obtain, which is probably going to be something significantly smaller than that. Say 10% of that 5 trillion that you'll be able to get because you're going to have competitors. Or some big companies just aren't going to like you and so they'll go with someone else. Or for whatever reason, you're never going to actually get to that. But as we shrink this down, if we still wind up with 10% of a $5 trillion market, that's $500 billion. That's a huge potential market to go after. That's really exciting for venture capitalist investors to think about. That's what we mean when we are thinking about the market size for your business that you should be considering when you're articulating the potential of your company. But then after we look at the numbers, we start to really think about, okay, how serious is this problem? Why would someone pay to solve it? How much are they going to actually be willing to pay? And are they going to be willing to keep paying for it? There's a common expression in venture capital investing that we would rather invest in Advil than vitamins. Anyone want to guess why? Yeah?
Because Advil addresses a very clear problem, pain, versus vitamins don't address any particular problem.
Bingo. People are much more willing to pay to solve problems that they feel, pains that they're experiencing, than to have nice things to have. That doesn't mean they don't pay for nice things. People pay for vitamins all the time. I took my vitamins this morning. People will pay for luxury goods that they certainly don't need. But from an investor's perspective, especially an early stage startup, if you're solving a problem that's creating pain for people, that's a lot stickier and that seems a lot more likely to succeed than if you're coming up with a nice to have that people will give up for whatever reason or will sacrifice when they encounter hard times or there's some sort of economic decline. But then after we think about the seriousness of the problem, we want to think about the staying power. Is this problem going to continue to exist 10 years from now? Or in other words, are you building a company based off of a fad, or are you building a company that is going to remain for the next 10, 20, 30 years and deliver great returns? Again, you're probably too young for this, but if anyone remembers the Beanie Baby boom of the 1990s, this is an example of a company that was built entirely on a fad, and people thought everyone's going to be keeping Beanie Babies for 3 decades. They were literally seeing them as investments, and they turned out to be absolutely worthless. They were just little stuffed animals with beans in them at the end of the day. We don't want to invest in Beanie Babies. We want to invest in the internet, in software, in artificial intelligence, or in manufacturing, things that will always be around. And you need to articulate why you're creating products and services, you're building a business that's going to address problems in the future, not just problems that people have today. Then we look at the business model. We look at the ways you're thinking about actually generating revenue, what the cost structure is, your scalability, how you're going to actually fit the market. All of that only comes after we really think about the market size, the problem you're addressing, and then only after that do we actually think about your competition. Who else is working in the space? Are they going to dominate the market, or are you going to actually be able to get a place in there to earn some of that revenue? And then only after we go through all of that do we actually dig into your idea, what you want to build. So then we ask, what is the product or service? Okay, let's say you want to build an ice cream parlor. If you're doing that, how are you differentiating your ice cream parlor from others in your area? And then how are you going to build a moat around that so that no other ice cream parlor is going to come in and start to take customers away from you? We want to look at your competitive advantage, your unique selling proposition, how you're differentiated from customers. That really is the critical thing to your idea. Because if other people are able to replicate what you're doing very quickly and easily, they will. Because when other people see you making money doing something, they're going to want to as well. You need a way to protect what you're doing. And investors are looking for that to ensure that they're going to get a return on their investment down the line. Then we look at your go-to-market strategy, how you're actually going to bring this out and get customers interested in this. Keep looking at the business model and look at the other risks and threats to what might happen to the product and service. But all of that, again, just comes at the very end. To succeed in being an entrepreneur and in your startup, the most important thing is to make sure that you have the right mindset and dedication to this, and that you're building a team around you that has that as well. And that you're looking at the right market that you're going to tap into, and then get into the product and service you're offering, constantly pivoting, constantly thinking about how to do better in order to build this out. Let me pause there and actually just see what questions you have about this framework for evaluating early stage startups. Yeah.
So if you want to start an idea, if you want to start a startup, should you be thinking of this ahead of time? So let's say I want to do some software. While I'm developing this product and while I'm going through the steps of actually making a service or product that I want to sell, should I be considering any of these steps beforehand, or should I just focus on the development of the product? Once I have that, then I can start thinking about these things.
Great question. Yes, you should absolutely be thinking about these three variables as you're developing the product, as you're thinking about starting the business, and before you even get to the product. Because remember what I said was one of the number one reasons that startups fail. Founders get obsessed with the product rather than the problem. And I'm gonna emphasize this again because look, as someone who has been and is an entrepreneur myself, I've been through this. There are so many ideas that I've had where I'm like, this is the best thing since sliced bread. Everyone should want this. Everyone will fall in love with this as soon as they hear about it. Only to find out after 6 or 12 months of working on it, no one was actually interested in it. And all the time that I spent building that product was for waste. All the money I invested in developing it was for waste. You don't want to do that, or you want to minimize that happening as much as possible. Which is why the best thing to do is to think about these three things. Obviously, you start off by thinking about what your skills are and who you want to work with and what skills they bring to the table and what you're trying to do. But really then start to think about what's the market you're going after? Who are the customers that you really want to serve? What's the problem that you're really trying to address for them? And dig really deep into that. So actually, before you even start working on the product, my recommendation would be to start talking with people that you want to serve. Talk with your ideal customers. Talk with potential investors. Talk with vendors who are going to help you out. Get their feedback to figure out what their pain points are that you can solve. If you've got an idea for the product, get their feedback on that product before you start developing it to see what they would change about it and how they would make it better. And then as you're developing the product, keep them included in it to get their input. And here's the great thing. If you're developing something valuable for them, if you're actually addressing one of their pain points, your customers will tell you that you're doing something that they care about. And they'll keep giving you feedback and give you time to help you because it's going to solve one of their problems. And this actually is a great early signal for you as to whether you're working on something important, because if they're not willing to give you time and advice on building this product, they aren't interested in it. They either don't see how the product is going to solve their problem, or they don't believe in you being capable of doing that in the future. And that gives you indicators of changes you need to make in building the business. So you absolutely should be thinking about these three things before you get to building the product and service. Really spend time thinking about the problem that you're solving, the people that you're doing it with, and be in conversation with them to inform how you're developing the product. You need a clear purpose for what you're doing. You need the right people, that's even emphasized in here. And at the end of the day, you need to figure out how you're going to develop a profit in order to build this out. And it's not for everyone. But if you want to do it, it can be incredibly fun, incredibly rewarding, and something that I and the whole Liberty Ventures network are here to help you out with. So I've shared this before, but I'll say it again. My email is alexander@libertyventures.xyz. And if we can help you out in some way, I'd love for us to do so. Thanks.